Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 05, Episode 18, where we dive into Daniel Goleman's insightful book, Focus, exploring how a leader's mastery of attention shapes the very destiny of an organization. This deep dive is really all about uncovering, the surprising power of where leaders choose to direct their gaze, and how that focus, or lack of it, shapes everything, from daily operations right up to, well, groundbreaking strategy. Okay, so Goleman kicks things off in Focus, talking about something we've probably all sat through, the infamous death by PowerPoint presentation. He points out that these often reflect, well, a fundamental lack of focused thinking, almost like a symptom.
Yeah, exactly. It's a symptom of an organization that hasn't really honed its attention. And what's really striking is how Goleman contrasts that common scenario with Steve Ballmer, former CEO of Microsoft.
Oh, right, Ballmer. What did he do differently?
Well, Ballmer actually banned those kinds of presentations
Yeah.
completely. He preferred to review the materials beforehand so he could just cut to the chase, as he put it, ask the pertinent questions right away, which he noted gives us greater focus. He really got that active directed attention was key.
Huh. So even the CEO of Microsoft was fighting death by PowerPoint. What does that tell us about leadership then? At its very core, it sounds like directing attention is, well, fundamental. Primal, almost.
Precisely. That's really the core talent of a leader, isn't it? Skillfully shifting attention, knowing where to put it, when, sensing trends, seizing opportunities. But Goleman makes this really crucial distinction. It's not just the leader's own focus that matters.
Okay.
It's about the entire organization's collective attention. It's bandwidth, you could say, and it's dexterity in applying that focus.
That's interesting. Collective attention, like the whole organization has this cumulative attention, almost like a shared pool that gets distributed, like a division of labor for who pays attention to what.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. A division of labor for focus. And this collective attention, well, it powers the organization's ability to read complex systems, to respond effectively. But just like you or me, organizations have, finite attention, limited capacity.
Right.
So they have to make conscious choices. Where do we allocate this limited resource? Focus intensely here and deliberately ignore that over there. The tricky part is deciding what to ignore.
And what happens if they get that wrong? What are the real world consequences?
Well, Goleman describes these signs of what he actually calls organizational attention deficit disorder, ADD, for the whole company, basically.
Organizational ADD. Wow. How does that show up?
It can manifest in making flawed decisions because you missed critical data, or maybe lacking time for real reflection on the big picture stuff, or struggling to get noticed, to capture attention in a super crowded marketplace, or, simply being unable to focus resources where they genuinely matter for the strategy.
Okay. That brings us to a really crucial point. In the marketplace itself, customer focus. That's like hard currency, isn't it? And the bar for actually getting that attention just seems to keep going up and up.
It absolutely does, which raises that big question. How do companies effectively grab attention? And maybe more importantly, how do they hold it? Now, new tech can always surprise us, create some buzz, but Goleman highlights this kind of renaissance, really, in a much older method, telling a good story.
Storytelling.
Exactly. Stories aren't just attention grabbers. They're inherently designed to keep it. They pull you in. And this is a lesson the attention industries, media, advertising, they mastered this ages ago. They know they're playing a zero-sum game for our focus, for your attention.
So a leader's story, their narrative, they can give the collective focus meaning. It guides where people put their attention, their energy. How does a leader balance all that then? What does a well-focused leader look like in practice?
Well, ultimately, leadership really hinges on effectively capturing and then directing that collective attention. It starts with focusing your own attention first. Then you need to attract and direct the attention of others, employees, peers, customers, clients, everyone. A well-focused leader, Goleman says, needs to balance three things: an inner focus, looking at the internal climate, the culture.
Yeah.
Another focus, looking at the competitive landscape, stakeholder relationships. And an outer focus, tuning into the larger realities shaping their environment. Economic trends, tech shifts, social movements, that kind of thing.
That sounds like a huge ripple effect, a massive responsibility. So the leader's specific concerns, their goals, whether they say them out loud or not, they end up guiding everyone else's focus.
It absolutely does. Think about it. When leaders choose a strategy, any strategy, they are fundamentally making a decision about where the organization's attention is going to go, what gets prioritized, what gets ignored, and ultimately what truly matters for the future. It's all about directing attention.
Okay, so if strategy is fundamentally about guiding attention. Where does the really innovative strategy come from? The game-changing stuff. Goleman shares this pretty fascinating anecdote about Kobun Chino, a Zen archery master.
Oh, yeah, the archery story. It's great.
He's demonstrated his skills, shoots an arrow
Yeah.
way over the target, lands in the Pacific Ocean, and then just declares bullseye.
Right. And the key insight Goleman draws here is how this connects to Arthur Schopenhauer's observation. Schopenhauer said, "Genius hits the target others do not see." And Kobun Chino, he was actually the Zen teacher of Steve Jobs.
Ah, Steve Jobs. Okay, that connection makes sense. He definitely hit targets nobody else saw coming.
Absolutely. Think about it. The whole concept of a user-friendly computer back then, radical. Or products like the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad. Things Goleman points out we hadn't realized we needed until Jobs showed us.
Right. We didn't know we needed them.
And remember when Jobs came back to Apple in '97? The company was floundering. They had this bewildering array of products. Just too much stuff.
Yeah, they were all over the place.
His strategy, it was incredibly simple, almost brutally simple. Focus. Instead of dozens of products, Apple would concentrate on just four core products. And he famously said, deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do.
That's such a powerful statement. And you can really feel the link back to his Zen practice there, can't you? That relentless filtering out, getting rid of the irrelevancies.
Totally. And his famous rule, that Apple products should let a user do anything in 3 clicks or less, that didn't come from just, a simplistic view. Not at all. It actually demanded this incredibly deep understanding of the complexity they were trying to simplify. It forces teams to find really elegant, intuitive alternatives. It was simplification born from depth.
Goleman also draws this interesting parallel way back to the Singer sewing machine.
Yeah.
Another radical vision, right? Defied all the assumptions back in the 19th century.
Yeah, that's a great example, too. They didn't just invent a new machine. They completely disrupted the market by making these complex mechanical things accessible to, housewives, ordinary people. And they even offered credit, which was unheard of for that kind of product then.
So it shows how these cultural shifts, they're constantly opening up new possibilities, new customers, new ways to buy, needs that are evolving.
Exactly. And while, consultants often come in with these off-the-shelf strategies, Goleman argues those tend to just fine-tune existing tactics. They optimize what's already there, they improve efficiency maybe, but they don't usually redefine the whole playing field.
Okay, so a genuinely new strategy means reorienting, finding a fresh focus, perceiving some novel position that your competitors just don't see yet. But if the consultants aren't usually the source of that, where does it come from?
Well, Goleman points to a classic article on strategy that basically just says it requires creativity and insight. Simple as that almost.
Creativity and insight.
And those two ingredients, as we've sort of been talking about, they really demand both that inner focus, trusting your gut, having that deep understanding, and the outer focus, that awareness of the bigger picture, the market, the ecosystem.
Like Mark Benioff at Salesforce, he was clearly watching the whole cloud computing evolution, right? That's an intense outer focus. But at the same time, he was trusting his own gut sense, his inner focus about where things were really heading.
Perfect example. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, the really effective leaders, they possess what Goleman calls a deep systems awareness. This helps them answer that constant question, where should we head and how do we get there? There's a great quote from Larry Brilliant that sums it up. Something like, if you think in a systems way that drives how you deal with values, vision, mission, strategy, goals, tactics, the whole chain.
Right, it connects everything.
Deliverables, evaluation, and the feedback loop that restarts the whole process. It's about strategic wisdom, seeing the whole interconnected web.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's look at what happens when things go wrong. When a leader, or maybe the whole organization, fails to direct attention well, or just completely misses those telling details on the horizon. The BlackBerry story feels like a really stark cautionary tale here.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating, really, to remember how dominant BlackBerry was. It was the darling of corporate IT. Everyone had one. Known for its closed, secure network, easy typing on that little keyboard, great security, amazing battery life.
Yeah, the battery lasted forever.
It really changed the game back then. Displaced everything else in the business world, became totally ubiquitous.
But then the iPhone arrived. And suddenly you had BYOD, bring your own device. And BlackBerry's whole lock on the corporate market just started to, evaporate.
And RIM, the company that made BlackBerry, they were just incredibly slow to react, painfully slow. Their first attempts at touchscreens, they were no match for what Apple and others were doing. And that closed network, which used to be a huge selling point, it suddenly became a massive liability. The world was moving towards phones as open platforms, for this huge universe of apps.
Right. The app ecosystem became critical. And their co-CEOs, who were both engineers, right, they were eventually forced out. And the new CEO, Thorsten Heinz, he later admitted RIM just missed several major paradigm shifts. Big ones.
Which raises the obvious question,
Yeah.
what were those shifts they missed? What were they not paying attention to? Well, Heinz himself pointed out a few key things. They apparently ignored the big move to 4G wireless networks, didn't build devices ready for it. They also profoundly underestimated how popular the iPhone's touchscreen would be. They clung to that physical keyboard for way too long.
Stubbornly clung to it.
Yeah. And Heinz even said, quite openly, if you have a great touch interface, people are actually willing to sacrifice battery life. Same thing with security. They fundamentally misunderstood what customers were starting to value more. Their attention was misplaced.
Wow. An analyst put it even more bluntly, didn't they? Said they seemed clueless about what customers wanted. And the result was just brutal. In only 5 years, RIM lost, 75% of its market value in the U.S.? They entered what Goleman calls that valley of death.
Yeah, that powerful phrase, valley of death, it comes from Andrew Grove, Intel's legendary CEO. He wrote that amazing book, Only the Paranoid Survive. And in it, he talks about Intel's own near-death moment when they were quite incredibly oblivious to their own sales force. The sales team was telling them customers were shifting to cheaper Japanese memory chips, but management wasn't listening. A total failure of organizational attention right there.
It's hard to imagine now Intel nearly dying if it hadn't been for their side business in microprocessors.
Exactly. Grove called that disconnect a strategic dissonance, a fundamental clash between what the company believed internally and what the market was actually doing externally.
Only the paranoid survive.
Yeah.
That title really says it all, doesn't it? It points to that need for constant vigilance, always scanning the horizon for that telling detail.
Definitely. And the tech sector, with its absolutely brutal pace of innovation, it just provides endless examples, case studies of companies missing huge shifts. Think about Microsoft's Zune trying to compete with the iPod. Remember the Zune?
Barely.
Right. It failed largely because Microsoft was apparently too fixated internally on Windows. Their attention was elsewhere.
Clay Shirky has that great observation that really just nails this whole dynamic. He says, first, the people running the old system don't notice the change.
Denial.
When they do, they assume it's minor. Then it's a niche, then a fad. And by the time they understand that the world has actually changed, they've squandered most of the time they had to adapt. It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck.
It really is. And RIM's story is just such a textbook example of that kind of organizational rigidity, fixating on the old new thing, the thing that made them successful, instead of looking towards the next new thing. An organization can be brilliant at execution, absolutely superb. But if its attention isn't tuned to the larger world, that perfect execution can end up just serving a completely failed strategy.
So this brings us to a key strategic concept often taught in business schools, right? The difference between exploitation and exploration.
Exactly. Exploitation versus exploration. Exploitation basically means refining and improving what you already do well. Your existing capacities, your current business models. It's often seen as the safer path, more predictable profits, like the steady tortoise in the race.
And exploration.
Exploration is the flip side. It's about actively experimenting with innovative alternatives, searching for new ways of doing things, maybe entirely new business models. This is the path that can lead to much bigger, game-changing success, finding the next new thing. But of course, it also carries much higher risks and often a much longer time frame before you see any payback. So it's the hare.
The hare. Tortoise and hare. So in this tension, what does a winning strategy usually look like?
Well, Goleman points out something interesting. Many companies that win consistently tend to focus more on refining current operations exploitation rather than constantly exploring radical shifts. However, the truly successful companies, the ones that lead industries over the long haul, they're often ambidextrous.
Ambidextrous, meaning they can do both.
Exactly. They're adept at doing both exploitation and exploration simultaneously. Think about Samsung with smartphones. They've been incredibly successful. And often they do it by separating these strategies into different units, different teams, different operating methods, even different cultures. But then you have a tight senior leadership team that's constantly balancing the inner focus, the outer focus, and that other focus we talked about. They manage the tension.
That's fascinating. It kind of parallels the individual mind, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Our own executive function has to manage both, the sustained concentration we need for routine tasks exploitation, and also that open, curious focus required for creativity and finding new things exploration.
Precisely. Exploration specifically demands that you intentionally disengage from your current focus. You have to mentally step back to search for new possibilities. It requires cognitive flexibility. Innovation.
And that tension between exploiting the known and exploring the unknown, it must operate in every single decision maker's mind, like every day. Do you stick with the battery technology that's profitable right now, or do you pour resources into R&D for some new energy storage thing that could make your current bestseller obsolete? Tough call.
It is a tough call, and the best decision makers, Goleman argues, are ambidextrous themselves. They know when to switch or when to maintain both tracks. They lead what he calls switch-hitting organizations, organizations that can innovate for the future while still containing costs today. Kodak is the classic tragic example of a company that was superb at exploitation analog photography, but just completely stumbled with exploration with the digital revolution. They couldn't make the switch.
Yeah, Kodak is cautionary tale number 2, maybe.
Yeah.
And this leads to another really interesting, maybe slightly unsettling point Goleman makes. Danger often increases during economic downturns, right? Companies instinctively go into cost-cutting mode.
Survival mode.
And that often comes at the expense of, say, caring for people or keeping up with external changes. Being in survival mode naturally narrows your focus. Dangerously so sometimes.
Absolutely. But here's the twist. Even prosperity doesn't guarantee that crucial ambidexterity. Grove, back at Intel, called this the success trap. Success can breed complacency. Intel, for instance, kept its best engineers working on memory chips, the thing that made them successful, even as the company's actual survival was starting to depend entirely on microprocessors. They just had trouble unsticking themselves from successful exploitation to necessary exploration.
It makes Apple's slogan, "Think Different," seem even more profound. It's literally dictating a switch to exploration mode, isn't it? So what's going on in the brain here? Why is it so hard for us, for organizations, to make that cognitive switch?
Yeah, Goleman dives into the neuroscience a bit here, and it's fascinating. Brain scans show that exploitation, doing the familiar routine, it activates brain areas linked to anticipation and reward. It literally feels good to coast along in a familiar groove.
The comfort zone.
Exactly. But exploration, searching for new possibilities, that mobilizes the brain's executive centers, the prefrontal cortex mainly, the parts responsible for controlling attention, for cognitive control. Searching for alternatives demands real, intentional cognitive effort. It takes work.
So what stops leaders, from making what sounds like a small neural effort to just disengage from those pleasing routines and explore?
Well, a few key things, unfortunately common things. Mental overload, chronic stress, sleep deprivation, even drinking too much alcohol. All these things deplete the resources in that executive circuitry. The prefrontal cortex gets tired. And when that happens, it's much harder to make that cognitive switch. We get stuck in our mental ruts. And these conditions, let's face it, are all too prevalent in many high-demand, high-pressure jobs today.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive into focus really has hammered home how a leader's mastery of attention, it's not just another skill, knowing where to place attention, when to shift it, how to inspire it in others. It really is the compass, isn't it? Guiding the whole organization's destiny.
Absolutely. And if you connect it all back to the bigger picture, it just underscores that real strategic wisdom. It isn't just about spotting obvious opportunities. It's about cultivating that inner focus, that outer focus that allows you to perceive possibilities before other people do. And then crucially, having the cognitive agility, that ambidexterity, to actually act decisively on those insights.
So thinking about all this, what really stands out to you from this exploration of focus? And maybe for everyone listening, as you consider that telling detail on the horizon in your own work, your own pursuits, just remember that ability to truly think different. It often starts with making that difficult, sometimes uncomfortable, but absolutely necessary choice. The choice to disengage from what's familiar and comfortable and deliberately embark on a new exploration.